Welcome back. We're in conversation with author and philosopher Peter Singer. At a time when many of us are justifiably anxious about the economy, he says we need to realize the misery of real poverty and how we can still make a difference. Professor Singer also contends that we can live more ethically if we choose to. Now, before we get back to our discussion, we've got the results of that chatroom poll where we asked, can individual donations eradicate global poverty? And 49% of you said yes, it can, while 51% of you said no, it cannot. As we get back to our discussion, let me put an email question we got from regular viewer Lilia Patterson, who says, what about the question of Somalia? Could being ethical be considered a luxury when civil society has broken down? And I wonder how you regard societies where you do have a conflict situation where the rules really have changed.
Yes, I think Somalia is a tragic case where it's very difficult to help just by giving aid because we don't have the law and order that provides the conditions for living ethically. So sometimes things do break down at that level and you get just a bare struggle for survival.
When you put it into the picture of the global, and we talked a little bit about the global economic situation, the IMF has just come out with an announcement that the world pretty much is in pretty bad shape, in recession. Do you see, as you campaign for a greater sort of equitable life, I guess, or at least greater distribution of wealth, do you see this kind of downturn and I guess the formalized announcement of the downturn really having an impact on the way people are going to behave?
Well, I think it's good that people should realize that the recession is not only affecting the wealthy world. And of course, that's what we have to expect. It's really going to hit the poor harder because they don't have that buffer. But we have to remember that we have been making steady progress in reducing the proportion of the world's population in poverty over the last 40 years. And this downturn may take us back a couple of years, but it's not erasing all of the gains. So I hope that when we start to grow again, we will still have a good base to build on. Do
you feel there's a mindset change? I mean, it's interesting to watch the change in the way the extremely wealthy, the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates, have moved heavily towards philanthropy. Are you seeing what you consider a mindset change?
Well, I think they are really pioneers. They have made a breakthrough in saying this is the kind of issue. If we're going to be philanthropists, it's not really a matter of building new concert houses or opera or art museums. This is really the important issue, and I think they're absolutely right about that. And I would like to see the other billionaires who are up there on the Forbes world list doing that as well. And I think we should say to them, look, it's not enough to give to great buildings that have your name on them. You really have to. If you have that much wealth, it carries a responsibility to do something for those who are less fortunate than you and have almost nothing.
An email that came in from Australia, your home country, from Sydney though, from Esanoma, another regular viewer. It says, how would you go about encouraging people to help fight poverty when we have become obsessed with celebrity and the lifestyles of the rich and famous? And I wonder whether you see society moving more towards compassion or moving away from it with the conditioning of the advertising world and the celebrity culture that our viewer talks about.
There are a lot of conflicting trends, but I do think we're moving towards it. We've had celebrities. Bono is the most famous, of course, but Madonna and Angelina Jolie, and so we've had lots of celebrities who have actually said that this is one of the issues, that they want to use their fame in order to advance. And I admire them for that. I think we should give them credit for that.
Okay, Saudi Arabia on the line. Kadir has a question or a comment. Kadir, go ahead.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, salam. How are you?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, fine.
Good.
Riz, I think in this regard, there are two things we should need to consider. One is the individual, as if just now you have shown the survey which says 51% the people's opinion. I do disagree with that, which I says that peace is the most essential part. And to get the peace is not the donation, it's a justice. Justice is the most important part that is going to play. And individual donation, I think the Islam has the answer. If anybody follows the religion of peace, which is Islam, the pillar of the Islam, which is zakat, you know it very well.
That's right, yeah. Kadir, let me put that to the professor. Actually, it's true that it's sort of institutionalized in some religions. There's tithings in the Christian church. There's the zakat in Islamic belief. And I wonder what Kadir was saying about peace and justice. We actually just a day ago on the show discussed the idea of justice before peace. Peace before justice, in order to quell conflict areas and just finally get people to a stable condition. Do you feel that he says it's not a question of just donations. It's a question of creating peace first, in order for, I guess, people to have some chance.
Yes, but I think he was also saying that we should think of this as a matter of justice and not just as a matter of charity. And that in a way is right. I think it is something that we should regard as owed from those who are really fortunate and have so much. to those who have so little. And if we could make it a kind of requirement, as the major religions all do really, then I think we would have the right kind of ethical standards. I mean, it doesn't have to come from religion, but it's something that religions share as well.
How is your situation? This is a more sort of, I guess, a broader subject for you to be debating, the alleviation of poverty. It's hard for people to argue with you. Of course, you've set up yourself in quite a controversial situation in the past, talking about bioethics and so on. How do you deal with the kind of backlash you've had sometimes when you've taken a stand on issues that you feel very strongly about, such as, for example, stem cell research, which, of course, now President Obama has reversed the position of the US government. Do you feel vindicated somewhat?
Well, I do, but I thought this always would be reversed eventually, because it seemed to be that it was a barrier to science that was not well founded ethically, as I see it. I thought President Bush was having a very uneasy compromise. And in my view, President Obama is right that we should try and keep science separate from ideology and look at the facts. And although you could say the embryo is a human life, it's clearly not a being that has any kind of awareness or consciousness, and I don't think we have to place it on the same kind of moral status as a later human life that does have some consciousness or awareness.
I guess you're going to find people asking, do you know that for sure? Can you be sure? And
well, I mean, the embryo is just a collection of cells. It doesn't have a brain. You can even divide. You take an embryo with 4 or 8 cells, you can divide those cells, and each one will grow into a separate organism.
I know sometimes your comments have been taken out of context, for example, on issues such as euthanasia. How do you handle that when, of course, when you're taking a stand and what's happening is what you're saying is taken in fragments for, I guess, part of the soundbite culture, but you end up having to backtrack and explain yourself.
It is, and this is the problem, exactly as you say, with the soundbite culture. I mean, you and I here are having some time to discuss these issues, but so often people will just grab a line or a sentence, and that will be what plays on the media, and then people get a horrible idea of what you're actually trying to say, and that's very frustrating because I can't get my ideas across in a single sentence.
Well, let's get Bart on the line from New Zealand. Bart, thank you for your patience. What would you like to ask?
Yes, I fully agree with the professor's premise, but I have this question of these governments are clearly failing their people by not feeding them or creating a system where they can be fed. Aren't we enabling these governments by feeding these people? And what is the end game of giving? I mean, do we just do it forever?
No, I'm not really just talking about feeding people. I think there may be some emergency situations, a drought or a civil war with the refugees, where you have to feed people. But I'm talking about helping people to feed themselves. So teaching them better agricultural techniques or providing them with better seeds, providing them with safe drinking water, helping them with getting better infrastructure so that if they grow crops they can get to international markets perhaps. I agree, it has to be sustainable. We shouldn't be having to do it forever.
Do you feel globalization is helping or hurting the poor?
I think globalization lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, particularly in India and in China, where it provided employment. And I think that's definitely a good thing. There are some ways in which globalization has led some multinational corporations to exploit some of the poor countries, perhaps to buy their resources from dictators when they know that the money was not going to benefit the people as a whole. And that's wrong. But on the whole, I see globalization as part of the process of bringing the rest of the world into the economy and helping them to achieve a sustainable living.
And how do you get past the risk of overexposure yourself? And again, a lot of well-known people are coming out and saying we have to do more for the poor. We have, for example, Professor Jeffrey Sachs and his campaigns, and a lot of people, are on the front line asking for more of this. And then sometimes there's the issue of, well, an equivalent of donor fatigue, I guess. It's kind of aid fatigue among people. How do you get around that?
Yes, well, that's why, as I was saying before, I think we want to make this part of our everyday commitments so that we make a pledge that there will be a monthly deduction from our credit card or a bank account, or we just get in the habit of writing a check each year. It should become part of normal life. It shouldn't be that there has to be an earthquake or a tsunami for us to say, oh, I must do something. It should be that we recognize that as long as there are 1 billion people in extreme poverty, it's our responsibility to make some regular contribution to alleviating that.
Let's squeeze in Sharmila from France with a question. Sharmila, what would you like to ask?
I would love to. I'm listening to Peter Singer's interview with Mr. Khan, and I'm of Indian origin, and I live in France for the last 35 years. And I have a mixed family of 2 religions and 2 races and all that. I think institutionalized religion hampers a lot the human understanding. We have to go beyond that.
Okay.
And
Sharmila, because we only have 20 seconds for the professor to respond. I'm sorry, we're so tight for time. But is that one of the issues, that perhaps also institutions such as religion can actually limit how people approach their own humanity?
Well, sometimes. I mean, I'm worried about religions that encourage people to have large families. That seems to me the big problem, because as well as sustainable feeding, we have to get down to a sustainable global population in the end.
Professor Singer, I hope we have a chance to chat again. It was a real pleasure to talk with you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being with us. On the next show, the plight of the 17 Chinese Muslims known as Uyghurs in Guantanamo. The US courts have ordered their release, but they fear returning to China, and other countries are not accepting them. What's next for them? What's going on in their homeland in the northwestern region of China? Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, see you next time.